What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Learning the Way in Business. It's your host, Yelisei Cholak. Thank you guys for tuning into another episode. I appreciate you guys for the support and love. You guys killed on the last episode. We probably had the most listens in a little while, and there's more of you coming in. So I really do appreciate that. And I'm also putting the effort to bring in bigger players, people that got value to say, people that you can listen to, get off the episode and be like, damn, that was good. So today's guest is one of those dudes, and some people call him the man, others call him the myth. I call him the legend because this man's incredible. He's always pursuing, challenging himself, always growing, and watching him is just so inspiring. It always pushes me out of my comfort zone. So by the title, you probably already saw his name. You know who he is. If you know who he is, you're going to stick around because you know it's good. If you don't know, then stick around because you're going to find out how good it is. Trever, welcome, bro.
Dude, thank you. Quite the intro. Put a lot of
Yeah,
pressure
of
on me.
course.
I'm getting big name and da 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 da. You're gonna want to legend, big name, and you're gonna want to stick around. So, I've got a lot to live up to based upon that introduction, and I don't plan on letting anybody down. This is this game of life, so to speak, is something that's very very meaningful to me, and any way that I can contribute to somebody's life to enhance it or make them think different or change their perspective, that's what I'm about, right? Because I've made tons and tons of money before, and I think a lot of your listeners, are listening because they're trying to find ways that they could tweak, change, or adjust something, or get a piece of information that will help them make more money, right? Like, really, that's what a lot of people are doing right now. Is they're the only reason why they seek information is so that it can increase their bank account, which is great, don't get me wrong, but increasing information really increases the individual, and that's where you have self-worth, which is the highest of net worths, if you ask me, because I've made a lot of money, man. And one year when I made the most money a couple of years ago, I was at the lowest point that I had ever been, right? And so individuals need to understand it really is about putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. And I was guilty of, focusing on one piece of the puzzle, and that was the money aspect of the puzzle. And when I finally got my hands on that piece of the puzzle, I looked around and I didn't have any of the other pieces, right? And in order for the picture to be clear and be whole, it requires all pieces of the puzzle, and it's not just one aspect. And so, I do want individuals to, raise their frequency and their vibration of who they are as an individual. But I also want them to understand in doing so, that will by default increase your net worth, but self-worth is just as important. And so, any value that I can bring to the listeners today, I'm excited about. I know that, you've been on this journey of self-improvement, discovering self, increasing your own frequency, your own vibrations, so that you could attract, better opportunities into your life, which would ultimately increase your net worth. But you'll notice that your self-worth, when that increases, that's one of the most important aspects, because when you believe in self, you're unstoppable.
Yep, you got it right. There's one thing I wanted to highlight is you were saying that we feel in like people are listening to this because they're trying to get some piece of information that'll bring them, more money. And that's what the podcast is called, Learning the Way in Business. And for those of you that don't know, like Trevor's the reason. Trevor name dropped that for me. Like at the mastermind, you were like, well, something about learning the way in business. And I'm like, right there. That's what I'm going to use for my podcast. So I appreciate that, bro. But you said people seek that information. They're very one-sided. The thing that I feel most proud of myself, and I'm grateful to you guys especially, is that I took risk and pretty much you can say kind of at some point sneaked in or kind of broke into these kind of rooms, at least the RBO at first, right? And like put myself on the line, took a financial risk to join them. I was very one-dimensional on the finance aspect, right? Very one-dimensional on just growing the business, just thinking that'll solve all of my problems because that's what I've always lacked in life, right? The other areas was okay, right? It wasn't the best, it was okay, But finances is what I always lacked, and I was like, you know what? If I can just fill that in, I'll be all right. I'll be fine. But as I start being around guys like you, being around people like that, and really start working and diving deeper in the business, like you realize that's not all to it. Like business gets tough, it gets hard, and when it gets to that point, you realize that it's not all to it. Like your mind is the engine to that. So you've got to work on that. You've got to upgrade that to get farther, to move progress. It's like shifting cars. You know, manual, your first gear, you're really stepping on it. Your RPMs are high. You're putting on this effort. You're hustling. You're trying to connect all these pieces together, and like you switch the gear to second, it requires less effort to go faster. That's your mindset. You switch it to third, you start leveraging, you start doing all this. Like you understand that it's just not one-sided, but your mindset is where you're going to make your decisions about business, faith, everything. And that's what I learned a lot from you guys, especially you. You always chase yourself, you always challenge yourself. I wanted you to touch on that too. Like, why do you do that? Why is that important equivalently to business? Because, like you said, you've made a lot of money, you're fairly well set. Why do you wake up early, do those 10, 15, 20-mile runs, the 38-mile run on your birthday? What's the point to that?
Well, the point is just what I alluded to initially when we jumped on the podcast is it for me, like to be very, very transparent, I got to a very low spot mentally, right? And I think that's pretty common in this day and age. That's why we have a lot of mental health issues, depression and suicides are high. You know, there's
Yep.
a lot of issues that people are facing, and that's because they're all seeking external validation, right? I was chasing money. Why? Because it's easy to measure. If I have a bunch of money, then at that point I get external validation. If I have the big house or I have the nice cars or, you know, if I have success, right? And as a young kid being poor, you know, I'd look at the houses on the hills and that's success, that's rich, right? And I wanted all those things. And that was the initial driver. When you grow up poor and the lights are getting shut off, it's a money issue, right? If you don't have food in the cabinets, that's a money issue. The fights that are happening, it's because of money issues. And so the only issue that I could pinpoint as a young child was we had money issues. So therefore, if when I get older, I focus on money, then I'll have no issues as long as I have money, right? And so that was what's called cognitive bias. Based upon the environment that I was in, my bias said that get this thing and all your problems will be solved. Now, if I grew up rich and I saw that we still had problems, then I would have a bias saying, well, money doesn't solve all your problems. You're still going to have issues, right? I just didn't grow up in that type of an environment. I grew up with hardly anything, right? And so I dedicated my life to business. I dedicated my life to getting rich or becoming financially independent, right? One main reason is I wanted other people to look at me and say that guy's successful, right? I wanted the validation externally rather than looking inward and having personal validation, self-validation, self-worth, right? And so I got to the point where I made the most money that I had ever made. And I was at the lowest point that I had ever been mentally, right? And at that point, I realized, and I had to ask myself questions, because I realized obviously money's not going to be the end all be all solve every one of my problems, right? There's still people that are worth $10 million that are depressed, that are
Yep.
alcoholics, that commit suicide. Like that isn't. Can it enhance your life? Absolutely. Should you chase, financial abundance? Absolutely. Why? Because it is an awesome self-improvement journey. Because when you chase financial independence, you're going to run across issues and problems that will force you to grow outside of the current version of yourself in order to overcome. And so every time you reach a problem in business, you're like, okay, look inward. What can I do to change this, adjust this, tweak this? And it forces you to make those adjustments. But then eventually, when you make a lot of those adjustments and the money starts flowing in, and you don't feel the validation that you were hoping that finances would bring or money would bring, you start asking yourself a little bit different questions, deeper questions, right? And so I was about to turn 37, and I said, I need to do something to prove to myself that I'm actually getting better with age. I think one of the worst things an individual could ever do is act as if their best years are behind them. How depressing is it that you look back on your life, man, when I was in high school or when I was in college or when I was 25 years old, I was in the best shape of my life. Like to me, that's depressing to say, okay, I've already had the best years that I've ever am ever going to have, and they're all in my past, right? And so I was about to turn 37, and I said I got to do something that shows that I'm actually improving as I age. Okay. I said, what do I hate doing? I hate running. Who doesn't, right? It's just never fun. uh, and so 39 days before I turned 37, I decided I was going to run 37 miles for my 37th birthday, and I trained 10 times and I did it. And I ran that 37 miles. Right after I did it, I accomplished that big, scary, crazy goal of an individual not being a runner at all to running, almost a marathon and a half, right?
Right.
And I rode that high for a period of time. That old accomplishments can still give us those dopamine hits when we bring it up to people. Oh, hey, 2 months ago I ran 37 miles for my 37th birthday. And people would respond like, oh, no way, that's insane. And what that would do externally, somebody was giving me validation and I would feel good and get that dopamine hit. And so I would bring up this old accomplishment because I stopped running after that in order to get external validation. One, I did prove to myself I can get better with age. I can set big, scary goals. And as long as I direct my focus towards those things, that I can accomplish that. But I got it done. And then it was like, oh, sweet, I got it done. Now I can end the pain, the misery, and stop running, right? Stop doing this thing that was basically torture. So I did, and I lived on that high for a few months. And my birthday's in July. So by October, November, I start coming back down off of that. And I'm now in a low place now that it's November, December. And that year I was pretty close to making a couple $1 million personally, right? And so I was pushing, multiple seven figures, but at the lowest point that I had ever been. And so it was like, something's off here. Something's wrong. I'm not doing it right. Like, how can I be making this much money and still feel hollow? So at that point, I said, what makes you feel best in your body and mind? That was the question that I asked myself. And I had to reflect. And again, it couldn't be external validation, it had to be what made me feel good in my body and mind. And I told myself, well, every single time I move my body, exercise, I feel good in my body and mind. I have clearer thoughts. I don't feel lag or lackadaisical, or sometimes when we sit on the couch and we just feel like lethargic. Like
Hmm.
I didn't feel lethargic when I was doing like 75 hard. It gave me something to aim towards every single day that I woke up, that would be healthy for my body and make me feel good in my mind. And
It
so,
wasn't necessarily comfortable, but it made you feel good.
yeah, yeah, it wasn't comfortable. It had nothing to do with comfort. Again, comfort and feeling good in your body and mind are two totally different things. Comfortable sitting on the lazy boy with a blanket wrapped over you and, eating an ice cream bar while you're what, like, that's comfortable. You're in no state of, misery. You're in no state of your brain saying, don't do this. Whatever you do, just stop sitting on the lazy boy and eating ice cream and watching Netflix. If your brain's not screaming at you, you're obviously in a high state of comfort. But in order to actually feel good, you have to earn feeling good. There's a price that you must pay in order to feel good. There's not a price that you must pay for comfort. Comfort's just there whenever you decide to take it easy, right? So feeling good and comfort, two totally different things. And so when I was reflecting back, when I felt the best in my body and mind, it was when I was reading every single day. It was when I was moving my body every single day. And so going into the following year, January 2022, I started 75 hard again. And at that point, I decided that I'm going to make this more of a lifestyle rather than just, well, I'm at a low spot, so I'm going to hurry and do something so that I can feel good again. And then when I start feeling good, stop doing all the things that made me feel good. And then I slowly cruise back down to a lower altitude. In other words, I feel like shit again. And then I have to figure out a way or just restart like a 75 hard or find a challenge. And so that's what I call kind of a yo-yo life. You're going up, down, up, down. When you're really low, you're willing to do whatever in order to feel good. When you're feeling good, you stop doing everything that you did in order to do so, because the only reason why you started to do what you did is because you were at a low point. Now you're not at a low point. You don't need to do those things anymore, right? And so that was kind of like I started having these realizations when people would say, "Man, I felt the best when I was on 75 hard." And I'm like, "Okay, so why did you stop doing it?" Why do we choose to stop doing all the things that we were doing when we say that that's when we felt the best in our body and mind? That's when we felt like the best in business because we were accomplishing the most things. Like, again, the only reason why people start a challenge is because they feel like that they're at a low place and they need to do something. They must do something because they cannot stand how they feel in that moment. So they're willing to do whatever they need to do in order to create change for themselves. But when we get back to the spot where we feel good, we don't feel like that we need to do difficult things to hold that altitude or hold that emotion or hold that confidence or self-worth. And so in 2022, I committed that I was going to do two-a-days every single day. I was going to read 10 pages every single day. Today's 431 out of the 1,000 days that I decided that I was going to do this. And so I wanted to stop just doing what I needed to do to feel good for a or stop doing the things that I knew I needed to do just to get out of the low. And I wanted to create an environment for myself that would force me to show up every single day for an extended period of time. And 1,000 days is obviously an extended period of time. And at day 431, I feel best than I've ever felt in my body and mind because I'm still honoring those daily disciplines. I still, got up yesterday when it was raining and when it was snowing, and I sat on the couch for an hour, trying to talk myself out of going for a run. Like I could just go for a walk today. My legs are tired. But I had made a commitment to myself the night before that I was going to do a minimum of a 5 mile run the next morning. And so I had that mental debate with myself. And anytime that you're having a debate with yourself, you've got to be very, very careful. Those are the 1 second moments that could make or break you, right? Like I could have easily pulled my foot off the gas and said, I'll just go for a walk instead of going for a run because I didn't have any parameters on my two-a-days every single day. I could ride a bike, I could lift, I could run, I could walk, anything that would move my body really is what it comes down to. And so would I still be honoring the 1,000 two-a-days if I chose to walk instead of run? Yeah, I would have, but I wouldn't be honoring what I told myself that I was going to do from the night before. And so I'm all about doing hard and difficult things and creating misery for myself in micro chunks so that I could live in bliss for the rest of the day. We can choose to sit in comfort for 24 hours every single day, all day, every week, every month, every year. And that state of comfort will give you a dull existence and give you depression. Or I could choose to live in misery for an hour or two every single day and live in bliss for the other 22 hours. I'm making my daily deposits every single day that says you're worth it. Feeling good in your body and mind is worth this exchange. Anything of value will require an exchange, period. And I think people are not seeing the value in exchange because when you start making the exchange, there's a lag period. You don't just show up to the gym on day one and then just feel great, right? So there's a lag period for the efforts that you're putting in order to see the reward or to see the result. It's the lag period that gets most people. They'll start on a path of change and start doing something, and then they stop doing that thing, and there's gaps in between their greatness. I would rather have a consistent good than an inconsistent great. And I show up on a day to day basis. I push myself on a day to day basis because I've already seen that finances or having an abundance of money isn't the end all be all. How can I show up in the world and impact people the way that I want to impact people if I don't feel good in my body and mind? How am I honoring God and the potential that He's given me on this earth if I don't honor the human design? The human design shows we're built for movement. Our brain has neuroplasticity, meaning it has endless ability to grow. So a lot of people grow through high school, grow through college, then they get a job and they stop all growth. Why do you think that depression's at an all-time high? We have mental health issues, suicide problem. There's no more growth. And the environment where society has set us up in a way to where we don't necessarily have to grow after a certain age. We can just exist and get by, which ultimately, we know where that leads us, right? And so the only reason why I do what I do is, one, it's honoring God, it's honoring His human design, and it makes me feel good in my body and mind outside of, having financial abundance. If I didn't get to that point of touching that money, I probably wouldn't have asked myself those questions and still put my head down and focused on, money, 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 money. But at the end of the day, I'd rather be worth $1 million and feel better than everybody on the planet than be worth $100 million and be depressed. How you feel about you matters and will dictate the outcome of your life, right? Whether you live a miserable one or a blissful one.
Yeah, I agree. Completely agree. You touched on something. You said that people, you have to make daily deposits, right? Let's say you go and you open a new bank account, right? And you open a bank account, you don't put something in, you tell them, hey, I want to withdraw $1,000. They're not going to let you do that. There's nothing on there. You're going to go negative. So what people do in life is they don't deposit anything. They withdraw. They withdraw. They withdraw. That's where the depression comes in. That's where feeling bad about yourself because you're only taking. You're not putting in there. Your account, your mental account is negative. And some people have negative 1,000. Some people have it negative 1,000,000. Right? So like you like on the run, you deposited, right? You put that big deposit in, and then you stopped. So now you were withdrawing. And then when that withdrawal ended, when you withdrew that whole deposit, you felt in a low dark place. So now you had to start making more deposits, and you realize that. So now you're always you're making more deposits than when you're withdrawing.
Yeah.
So that's like that's a great example to understand. Like show up every day, and like whenever you like, especially in startups, when you start something, you start a business, or like being a young entrepreneur, you start something like, people paint the picture of how good it is. So like you barely start making deposits, if none, and then you want to withdraw. So then you feel bad because then or you don't feel good, you don't feel great, or you think it's not working because you haven't deposited anything yet. Like you can't withdraw $1 million check if you don't deposit a minimum of $1 million, right? So like that's what I think is where depression settles in because people only they deposit, they'll sit on the couch, they'll take chunks off, and their account goes negative. The problem with that is a banker isn't there to like, not everyone has someone like a banker to stop them. I can't let you take that deposit because you don't have anything in there because you're in control of your life. So if you're in control of your life and you don't stop yourself, if you don't tell yourself, hey, I have not deposited anything in there, I can't take anything out. I'm going to have to start depositing.
Yeah, no doubt. I love that analogy. That's a beautiful analogy and it's very well said. It also gets to a point of, there's individuals that, exercise on a day-to-day basis, and they feel like that they're doing a lot of the right things, but yet they still have down days, right? And they're like,
Yep.
why? Like I feel like I'm, saying prayers, I'm practicing gratitude, I go to the gym. Like, isn't that the magic pill? Shouldn't it all be fixed and all be better? The reality is, if it's no longer difficult for you, you're not going to receive the exact same outcome. So, for instance, when I went into January 1, 2022 and decided to do the two-a-days and, read the 10 pages, it was difficult because it was something new. And then it was like 4 or 5 months in that I was like, okay, this is no longer difficult. This is just what I do every single day. And that's when I said, maybe I need to start that running up again, because my birthday was coming around again. And I was like, am I going to run 38 miles for my 38th birthday and do what I did last year? Because the previous year is like, I'm going to do this once and just be done with it. But then it hit me when I was out, on a workout and just going for a walk. And I said, this is no longer hard. I'm now just kind of going through the motions. So the real question is that I have for the listeners is, what you're doing right now difficult for you, the individual that you are today, or is what you're doing today difficult for the individual that you used to be? Because we have to ask ourselves, are we challenging the individual that we are? Are we really growing from the actions or the habits that we have? Or are we just honoring old actions and habits that used to be difficult? If showing up to the gym once a day was difficult for an individual at one point, they credit themselves for showing up to the gym every single day, even though it's been 2 years now. Just because it was difficult for the version of who they were 2 years ago, they still give themselves credit for showing up and doing that one thing that was once difficult, that is now just a routine for you and is no longer challenging.
Or because the mass doesn't do that,
Because
right?
yeah,
It compares itself to the
we're
mass.
yes, we're utilizing a measuring tape based upon society rather than looking inward and asking, is this hard for me? Is this challenge? Could it be hard for other people? Like, somebody that could dunk a basketball, that's hard for me at 5'7", but somebody that's, it's not, if they just dunked a basketball, should they credit themselves for never growing outside of being able to dunk a basketball because they're 6'6", and they're using their measuring stick based upon what Trever can do? Or should they use their measuring stick and say, am I challenging myself, and should I do a 360 windmill dunk versus just a regular dunk? Like, what could you do to make whatever it is you do a little bit more difficult? And then it got to the point where I was, a couple months out for my 38th birthday, and I said, I need to start running and lifting, not just lifting and going for a walk for 45 minutes, because that's just what I do. And I wasn't getting the same growth that I once got when I first started doing it. And so I started kind of feeling myself slip a little bit. And I was like, what's going on? I'm doing all the right things. And guess what? The human experience, a third of the time you're going to feel like shit. A third of the time you're going to feel okay. And a third of the time you're going to feel great. The difference between individuals that are highly successful and an average person is, when the average person is at the third of their life where they're not feeling good, they honor those emotions. When they feel okay, they honor those emotions. Their efforts are okay. And when they feel good, their efforts are good and they honor those emotions. An Olympic athlete that has 4 years in between showing up for the big stage, do you really think that they can just show up when they would like, or show up when they feel good? Or training for 4 years straight, we have to know a part of the human experiences is highs and lows. They have to be going through the same highs and lows that we all go through and all experience, but they're honoring the design based upon the result that they want. So they understand where they're going. They've designed something that says, if I do these things, this recipe, so to speak, it will lead to this end result. Not, let's just wake up and see how I feel and see what I can get done. Either you're programming your life or society is doing it for you. There is no middle ground. So I'm a big believer in designing the day that will design the individual that will give you the outcome that you're looking for. And so we have to understand that I'm not unique. I'm not special. I'm not different. I feel like shit some days. I feel okay some days, and I feel great some days. Who are you on the days that you feel like shit, and that you feel okay, and that you feel great? You would not know what days I feel like shit, okay, or great, because my days will look similar. I will still show up in the same way regardless of the emotion. And if you can't control your own mind and you can't actually get yourself out of bed to do the thing that you know will benefit you, that's a scary thing. This is the mind that you're stuck with for the rest of your life. And if you can't figure out how to control it, you can't figure out how to game it, who knows where you're going to end up? I know where I'm going to end up because I've designed the day. The Olympic athlete knows where they're going to end up and knows that they're going to get a shot at this thing because they've designed a day for 4 years straight, a training regimen that will give them the desired result that they seek. Whether they feel like, I think it was Michael Phelps, for 5 years straight, he was in the pool 2 times a day, every single day. He didn't miss a day. And we can't be naive to think that he didn't have days where he had a headache, days where he just was exhausted, where he just didn't feel like showing up. Like, we can't take that away from him. He's earned what he's earned based upon doing all the things that other people aren't willing to do. And that's literally just showing up when you don't feel like it. Those are the gaps and the inconsistencies that will determine an individual that will have success or be average. And that's it. There's nothing else. It's not special, it's not unique. It's an extended period of time with the same patterns repeated over and over. Eric Thomas says it. He says he's not doing anything different. He's just done it for 20 years. He used to show up and speak at elementary schools. But then he showed up and started getting paid $5,000, then 10, and now because his extended history of consistency, he's now getting paid $100,000 to $200,000 every time he speaks. So the results compound by showing up in the same way on a day-to-day basis for an extended period of time. And if you can't do that, then we'll let the waves and the tide take you wherever it's going to take you, and it's probably not going to be a pleasant place.
Yep. Facts, dude. You said it. You said it. You mentioned in the beginning about honoring the body God gave us. I was thinking about this because you were talking about discipline, showing up. Like, there's days when you don't feel good and you still show up, and there's days you feel good and you still show up. But if someone looks at it, they don't know when you will not feel good, right? And I was thinking about this like quite yesterday. I was at prayer and I was like thinking like God honors discipline because God shows up. God is who He is no matter the circumstance, right? Like, He's the same. It doesn't matter my circumstance or how I act. He's the same. He is who He is. That's what essentially discipline is. Like, you are who you are. You're not controlled by the outcome. You're not controlled by circumstances. Like, discipline is a great thing to have. It's freedom. It's ultimately freedom because your mind doesn't have control over you. The circumstances don't have control over you. How you feel does not have control over you. So, like, it's something I'm leaning more and more into is discipline because I understand there's ultimate freedom. Like, I've hired a fitness coach, right? And part of like my goal is to cut my fat, to cut weight, right? And so one of the things I got to do is track my macros, track my food, and show up daily to the gym. I've noticed that I've been lacking in tracking my food, right? I'd be like, either I won't plan it out or I won't put it in because I don't feel like it. And I thought to myself, and I told myself, like, this is your mindset, right? You're not tracking your macros. That is why you're bad at tracking your finances. You're not showing consistently to the gym, like you don't show up when you feel like it. That's why you don't have the results you want. So, like, what really was an opener to me is like how I really recommend people to start like getting into fitness because you learn so much fitness, challenging yourself. and moving your body, because you learn so much about your mindset that you can apply in business, in faith, in life, everywhere. So like, and I thought to myself, Yelse, if you could show up, if you could like dial this in, copy and paste in your business, copy and paste that in your life, copy and paste that in your faith, watch all those other areas improve.
They
Like,
will.
it's
It
like
will.
learning that skill.
It's impossible for an individual to improve self and not have something else improve, because you're
Mm-hmm.
taking the improved version of you into any situation or circumstance. And so if you are improved, the situations and circumstances won't matter as much. It just matters who you are and how you show up in the world.
Yep.
Well, that's what's going to dictate the outcome, right? Like,
Yep.
will we have crappy or shitty circumstances or situations? Yes, of course. But how you show up matters. And if you could show up to the gym when you don't feel like doing it, guess what? You could show up to the job site when you don't feel like doing it. Guess what? You can sit down and review your finances when you don't feel like doing it. Guess what? You can have that difficult conversation with a spouse or a business partner when you don't feel like doing it. The idea is to create an environment where you know for a fact eventually your mind will turn on itself. And
Create that skill.
if going into the situation you're already aware that that will happen and days like that are going to appear, when they do happen, you can use it as an indicator that this is a day where I'm actually making improvement, right? It's almost like when you're lifting weights, the first few reps are easy, but when it starts to hurt and burn, that's where the difference is. When you don't feel like doing that next rep, but you do it anyways, there's real progress. When you don't feel like showing up to the gym, but you do it anyways, that's the resistance. What you're doing is you're going up against the old version of yourself and who you were and how that individual would show up in the world. And you're creating a new individual, which requires resistance, just like it would with lifting weights in order to create new muscle, right? And so we have to understand that resistance is more so our friend than it is our foe, right? And we too often get to the point where we hit a threshold, what I call the upper limit threshold of the individual that we are today, and then we cool our jets a little bit, right? We go back to who we were because it is hard or it is difficult and we don't feel like doing it. The individual that doesn't feel like doing it is the individual that you're trying to move away from, is the individual that you no longer want to be. And so if you could figure out a way to overcome that situation or overcome that hurdle, on the other side of the hurdle is a new version of yourself, a more disciplined version, a more self-confident individual, and again, more disciplined, self-worth, more confident. Like, how is that individual not going to create a better outcome in life in general if you now take these new traits, this new individual into whatever circumstance it is that you're facing?
Yep. Yep. Um, there's a controversial question or topic going around, or that exists. Um, like, money doesn't buy happiness. Like, for the people that say money doesn't buy happiness, you don't know where to shop. What is your take on that? Do you think money buys happiness? Do you think it buys fulfillment?
Um, it buys external validation. So if you get your fulfillment from external validation and that's the way that you're living your life, sure, it could give you an emotion, a dopamine hit by having somebody else see you drive that nice car or live in that nice house. Look, everybody has to run their own race and everybody has to put their own value system on things, right? Like for me, cars isn't the thing or big houses isn't the thing. I got to a point where I bought my dream lot, 1 acre, one of 12 lots, right? And it was $500,000. I went in there, paid for it cash. I'm going to build this big, beautiful house with a pool overlooking the whole city. Everybody's going to know I'm successful. Everybody. I bought it, and the emotion of wanting what I thought that I wanted went completely away, and it made me look inside. Now, if somebody wants, to have a bunch of money and fancy cars and big houses, and they truly believe that that will bring them happiness, which either you're a happy person or you're not a happy person, and money will just magnify the individual that you truly are. Because guess what? It magnified me being just a hollow individual. It forced me to look at myself and took away any hope that money was going to fix something. But if you're a good human being and you exercise, you move your body, you uplift people, and then you focus on financial abundance, when you get financial abundance, I think it will increase your quality of life because you're a quality individual, right? So
Yep.
do I think that you need money to be happy? No. I think that there's, kids in a third world country right now as we're speaking kicking something that appears to look like a soccer ball that's not even a soccer ball, that's laughing and they're having a good time, and they have more joy in their existence than most children in the United States on TikTok that feel worthless because they don't get as many likes as somebody else. So again, what's their value system? Their value system is external validation. If I get X amount of likes, maybe if I shake my ass a little bit more on TikTok, more people will view it, right? So what they're trying to do is all they're trying to do is get some form of self-worth. You can either get self-worth by looking inward and figuring out what truly matters to you, or you could try to get self-worth through external validations in what other people feel about you. And I think we have it completely wrong. So, do I think money enhances life? Yes, of course it does. Like, if I'm able to give my mom, money and help her out, like that makes me feel good and gives her an opportunity to be less stressed. So does that bring me a form of happiness? Absolutely. Do I think that she's going to be depressed or I'm going to be depressed if I wasn't able to do that? As long as I'm doing all the right things, honoring God, honoring my body, you know, uh practicing gratitude, doing all the right things, do I think that I could be happy and have an existence that's joyful without tens of millions of dollars? I believe that that's highly possible. And so for me, I had to learn the hard way, and I do see people online saying, "Oh, well, then you haven't been able to buy that." Like, look, dude, I've been on private jets. I rent beach houses when I go on vacations. Like I've done all of those things that these people online are talking about. I bought the most premier piece of property in our community and was going to build the biggest, grandest house. But I still wasn't happy until I looked inward and said, what is it that you truly want? I want land. I want to see my kids run around on land. I want to see them get dirty, not be on some house on a hill inside of a pool in a big bougie neighborhood where everybody has the nicest boat, the nicest trucks, and everybody's competing against everybody. I don't want my kids to have friends that come over just because we're financially okay.
Yep.
Like I went and bought a house out in the middle of nowhere, right? With 3 acres right on a river, has an orchard, horse pasture, for our chicken. Like that might not be something that makes somebody happy, and that's fine. But I had to reevaluate, was the things that I thought would make me happy, was that coming from me, or was that programmed in me by society saying that in order to be happy, you have to have the big house, the pool, the cars, the views, all of these things. I prefer more of a simple life with property and land, peace, quiet, um, and creating an environment that's inviting for my kids to go play outside rather than trying to, be on TikTok or whatever it is. And so I know that I don't know if I really fully answered that question.
You did. I'll clarify though. Is what you said is that money does not like if money buys or does not buy happiness is not the thing or the question. It's that money magnifies what you have or who you are. Because if you're miserable and you're depressed and you go get a bunch of money, that's going to multiply. Like you said, if you're a great human being and you do all these great things and you're a great man at heart and you get money, You're gonna help your mom out. You're gonna help your circle out. You're gonna improve as a person because that is who you are inside. That's what it was that nobody really saw, and then it magnified, right? Same thing. If you're a person that doesn't have those values and is selfish and arrogant, that's gonna magnify. People are gonna see that. So you really brought up a good point. Is that like it's not that it buys or doesn't buy, it just magnifies who you are. So like for you, jets and cars, like you've been there. You've did all that. Like you've rented those beach houses on vacation. Like it's okay. It doesn't validate or like it feels good, but it doesn't fulfill you. And that's what I think. Like everyone's striving to be happy, and I've said this on your guys' podcast too. Like I thought happiness was waking up in the morning, not having stress, feeling great, not having responsibilities, until I realized like for me, that's not happiness. Happiness is fulfillment. Happiness is having hope. Happiness is faith. Like when I put those together, knowing I've got a bright future, doesn't matter what happens, knowing that I feel good about what I'm doing and I'm growing in this. So like I may be stressed, I may be not in a great mood, right? I may not be joyful, but if you ask me if I'm happy, I am. Because I have those things. And I think people misinterpret that like that happiness is a joyful feeling or it is not having stress. Sure, like that stuff feels good in it. Like someone may have an interpretation, but I really believe that it's fulfillment. It's like feeling good inside, feeling good about yourself. It's about having faith, about having it anchored, having hope in the future, knowing that like whatever you're going through, you'll be okay. That's happiness.
Yeah, I mean, dude, there's somebody that lives in a van down by the river that's happy as possibly could be right now because they're literally just honoring, how they feel inside. They have self-worth. They don't need external things to be happy, right? But they've looked inward and determined, what do I want my life to look like? And then there's another individual right now that exists on the planet that's already worth $20 million, and he's not happy because he's not worth $50 million, right? And so again, it's we have to start looking a little bit more inward and saying, what brings me happiness and fulfillment or self-worth? And really, I believe the only thing that will bring happiness, fulfillment, and self-worth is honoring the body and the human design. I believe that if you're not continually growing or challenging or pushing yourself or surprising yourself in terms of some of the things that you're accomplishing, and again, it doesn't mean just finances. You know, I was sitting in a room with Jesse Itzler at one point. He sold his company for $1 billion. And he lives in freaking running shorts and a basic t-shirt. Like he doesn't have the fancy watches and $10,000 suits. That's just, but could he have those things? Yes. He's just honoring himself and what makes him feel best in his body and mind. So he's determined that, and he has endless amounts of money. And what he said is, I get asked all the time, how does it feel to sell a company for $1 billion? And he said, it's an accomplishment. And any time that we accomplish anything in life, we will get an emotion where we're proud of ourselves because we accomplished something. And he goes, I will tell you this, too many people are putting weight on what they're going to feel like in 10 years when they build this big business or they exit this company, when you could legitimately go sign up for a half marathon or a marathon. And when you're done with it, you're going to feel a sense of accomplishment. And he goes, the sense or the emotion and the feeling of being proud of yourself and feeling accomplished is the same whether you run the marathon and you finish it because it was big and scary, or whether you sold your company for $1 billion.
Right.
And so
Yeah, it's
we don't have to wait for something to happen in order to feel good about who we are, but we do have to prove to ourselves that we're capable of stretching the current version of who we are in order to get a sense of accomplishment. I wasn't getting a sense of accomplishment doing the same thing I did for 5 months in a row, so I had to figure out how to turn the dial up a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to lift and run. And I know that is going to be difficult, and if I can actually do it, I'm going to feel a sense of what? Accomplishment. And really, it doesn't matter what you're accomplishing.
yeah. So People wait till they can build that million or billion dollar company like Jesse sold to feel accomplished. And what you're saying is like, you don't have to wait. Go sign up for a marathon. Go do some heavy lifting. Challenge yourself. You'll feel that same accomplishment. But if you can, if you can pretty much rinse and repeat that, make it repetitive daily to where you show up, you surprise yourself today, and you do that every single day, you feel accomplished. Like, you're not just waiting till that one, till 30 years ahead when you build this massive empire, you sell it for a huge price tag, then you feel accomplished. Accomplished is your lifestyle. Like, working out is your lifestyle because people wait to feel accomplished. Like, they attach their happiness or accomplishment to farther ahead when in reality, like, you can make that your lifestyle. You can make that your day-to-day living to where you wake up and when you go to sleep, you feel accomplished. That's kind of like what, like, I've hired a coach, right? And in their ecosystem of having, there's a thing called championship day, right? You create your own championship day of what you do, and if you feel like you accomplish that, it does not matter what went wrong in that day. It does not, like, it absolutely doesn't matter. Your business burnt down, like your homie passed away, doesn't matter. You won the day. So, like, you've got to make that repetitive. You've got to make it your lifestyle to feel accomplished, to win every single day, to show up, rinse and repeat, day in and day out.
No doubt. That's all it is. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that and do it at a high level in all the areas in life that truly matter, whether it's with your family, whether it's, honoring the human design and moving your body and reading and showing up for your employees and your business and, on the financial side of things, it's removing distractions.
Yep.
I haven't watched. I guess I watched the Super Bowl this year. Last year I didn't watch it, so I guess I've watched one football game in the last 2 or 3 years. I haven't watched any basketball games in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't utilize my time in a way that doesn't give me a return on that investment. Right? If I'm moving my body, I get a return on that investment forever because I'm becoming healthier. If I spend time with my kids, I'm never going to regret that because they're going to grow old and I'm going to get a return on that investment forever. If
Yep.
I spend that time in my business and make that deposit there, I'm never going to regret that because it's going to grow me financially, right? Like if I make time to sit down and pray every single day and make a deposit in that area, I don't think I'm going to regret it because I'm going to grow in my faith, right? So like the question is, where are you placing your time? Like that's really the most important question. And if you can allocate time for all the areas that are really truly important and you are challenging yourself in all of those areas, the funny thing is time for meaningless things start dwindling away. The only reason why you have time for meaningless things because you haven't prioritized what's important to you and you haven't designed a day that would make deposits in the areas that you said are a priority.
Yep. 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 I agree, bro. I agree. Um, Dude, it's been quite an episode. You've dropped a lot of stuff. I really enjoyed listening to you, and I think people like this is one of the episodes where you need to get a notebook and re-listen to it, because like you've said a lot of stuff. Um, yeah, I'm sure you got to go. Time is wrapping up, so we're gonna end it here. But where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? Maybe someone has a question, or maybe they like what you said. They just want to follow, see what you're about, or hit you up, tell you thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you can send a message to real business owners. I no longer operate that account. I removed myself from it for the purpose of, distractions, right? As I
Yep.
just barely alluded to as we were wrapping up. I don't need distractions, but if somebody wants to find me on Facebook, it's just Trever Cowley or, on Instagram it's Trevor Lee Cowley. I'll still check in on some of those platforms, but we have a media team that runs Real Business Owners at this point. But you could send a message there and it will get to me. They'll send it to me one way or another.
Awesome, awesome. Real quick, I wanted to before we end, I wanted to touch on something. I think it's important. Like you were saying about um like having those distractions, right? Like having the things that Like, for example, I've always had this thing, like, man, I don't, like, you see people with, like, that struggle with drinking, or they struggle with drugs, or they have their own sort of, like, what you guys recently dropped an episode, having their own vice or thing they get away to. And, I would think, like, I'm good because I don't do any of those stuff. But, like, in reality, like, to what you were saying, this own show, like, look inside yourself. Look, every person should really look deep inside yourself, because you may not be struggling with something someone else struggles, but then, or like, you may not have those distractions or thing you run away to, or things that you do that aren't good for you. You may not have it what somebody else does, but I guarantee that you have your own that you do. So, like, as we wrap up and as you listen to this and think about it, look deep down in yourself and figure out, what is there that I am doing. It may not be drinking, it may not be drugs, it may not be social media, parties, none of that stuff, but there might be something that you're doing that is harmful for you, that is a distraction, that is not getting you to where you are. So I'd encourage you guys to dig down deeper into that, to take a look in yourself. And Trevor, thank you so much for coming out here, bro. I really appreciate it. I know your time's valuable. It was always great. It's great chopping it up with you. You
Likewise.
guys, if you guys found this valuable, if you enjoyed this episode, drop him a follow, connect with him, follow Real Business Owners. They've got their own podcast. You guys might not want to miss on that one, because that podcast really helped me out when I was struggling in business in the early stages. So you guys want to follow, check it out. Share this with your friends and your loved ones, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.